at this meeting. Our webinar's audio and video are being live streamed on the COG website through COG's YouTube account. To facilitate questions, comments for our speakers as smoothly as possible during the meeting, there are two options. The first is to indicate in the chat function that you have a question. After I facilitate those, I will then verbally call for any questions from each state. This is a good moment for those who are on the phone only to ask their questions. During votes, after a motion to adopt the resolution is made and properly seconded, we will proceed to discussion. After discussion, I'll first ask for abstentions and nay votes. So after discussion, abstentions and nay votes. I ask that you state your name and jurisdiction as you state your vote, if it's an abstention or a nay vote. Then I will take as a yes the rest of the votes. So nay votes and abstentions, state your name and jurisdiction as you state your nay or abstention, and then the rest I will take as a yes vote. Okay, Ms. Pandick, please take the roll of those present for our meeting today.
Yes, sir. We have all of the jurisdictions present. I'm going to start with the district, and I have Councilman White. Is there anyone else from the District of Columbia? Going to the state of Maryland, I have Mr. Collins, Mr. O'Connor, Ms. Schaefer, Mr. Dennis, Mr. Byrd, from Laurel, Mr. Moe, and Mr. Goddard, Ms. Navarro, Chair Davis, Ms. Newton, Ms. Stewart. Is there anyone else from the state of Maryland? Then I have from the Commonwealth of Virginia, Mr. Dorsey, Ms. Gross, Mr. Lusk, Ms. Randall, Ms. Wheeler, and Ms. Bailey. Is there anyone else from the Commonwealth? We are one person shy of a quorum, Mr. Chair, but I think we'll be getting there probably shortly. I'll let you know when that occurs.
Thank you much. And what we'll do is we'll power through the agenda, and prayerfully we'll get there before we have to take a vote. So let me move into the chairman's report. I hope by now you all have been able to join the COG and the Transportation Planning Boards for our virtual town hall series, leaning into 2021, more equitable, more resilient, and are beginning to spread the word to your colleagues. The sessions have truly been insightful, and I hope COG board members will take advantage of this learning opportunity. I know Chair Wheeler and Council President Collins were both on the last one. Would either of you like to share any insights or any takeaways? Chair Wheeler?
I would just say, just getting sort of that broader perspective and hearing what tangible things that people are doing in this area is really useful. I'm always about let's not recreate the wheel, and having those examples and those people share some of the tangible things they were doing was very useful. And I look forward to the next one.
Appreciate that. How about you, Mr. Collins, Council President Collins?
No, very briefly. I mean, it's informative for us, and particularly within our jurisdiction, because we're one of the smaller jurisdictions within COG, but we recognize, as our county has progressed through the years and become more diverse, a recognition of where we are and how to facilitate that in the best interest of our community is really paramount. So, that overall discussion was very informative. It really was.
Thank you, Council President Collins. And I will say that you were a showstopper with your soliloquy at the beginning of the meeting. I certainly appreciate it because you're keeping the fire under the feet here in Prince George's County, as Charles County in the next census will replace Prince George's County as the jurisdiction with the most affluent African-American population in the country. That's what I'm told by the census numbers. Is that right?
Yes, absolutely correct.
So we have some heavy lifting at home. We have some heavy lifting here at home to do the next thing, and I'll tell you what that is next year.
Uh-oh.
Watch out, Prince George's County on the move. I
Mr.
strongly
Chairman,
encourage.
if I might tell you,
Uh-huh.
I apologize. We do have quorum. Mr. Hucker has joined us. And also I would note that Ms. Brixman's legislative aide, Mr. Harris, is monitoring for her.
And
Appreciate-
Dave Snyder, City of Falls Church joined as well.
Thank you, Mr. Snyder.
I appreciate that, Ms. Pandick, and we'll take it as that the fact that the chair needs not to filibuster any longer.
That's correct, sir. You can filibuster, but not for quorum.
So thank you again, and welcome aboard, colleagues. I strongly encourage all board members to register for the next session taking place Friday, November the 20th at noon. And this time the topic is Shaping Resilient Communities, Whole Community Health. And that's a very timely topic, as all of these topics have been. So I'm looking forward to you coming and sharing a word with many of your colleagues so that we can continue this successful consensus building effort that the TPB and COG board has put together. And if you look in page 4 of your packet, you should see a little more information there. So let me move on to the COG annual meeting. As you know, we will be hosting this year's COG annual board meeting virtually on WebEx. Please make sure that you register for the meeting, which will be held Wednesday, December the 9th. Again, our annual meeting will be held virtually via WebEx, and that's on Wednesday, December 9th. Please make sure you register. You can do so online at mwcog.org/annual meeting, or please contact Ms. Pat Warren if you have any questions. Moving on, the COG Chief Equity Officers Committee. As you all know, advancing racial equity has been a focus for COG over the past couple of years. It was identified as a COG board priority in January of this year. In July, the board passed Resolution R26-2020, affirming that our work will be anti-racist, will advance equity, and that equity will be woven into COG's region forward vision, operations, programs, and priorities. I am happy to report that COG will be creating a Chief Equity Officers Technical Committee. This new committee will build on the work of the Racial Equity Officers Work Group and report to the Chief Administrative Officers Committee. Creation of this standing committee will provide a hub for our jurisdictions to continue tackling issues of racial equity and a forum to advance regional racial equity priorities and initiatives. Great going, team. First year board member insights. It's been a challenging year for us all. At the beginning of this year, we had a number of new elected officials join the COG board. After just 2 meetings in person, the COVID-19 pandemic forced our meetings to occur virtually. While the work of the COG board has continued, this is surely a different experience for new members as they got to know the COG. I would like to take some time today to hear from a few of our new members about their experience on the COG board thus far. First, I'd like to call on Fairfax County Supervisor Rodney Lusk. Ms. Lusk, Supervisor Lusk, are you queued up? We don't have Mr. Lusk queued up.
Okay, can you hear me now?
I can. There you go.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, for the opportunity to share my thoughts as a new member of this Council of Governments. I truly value the work of this organization and appreciate that we are approaching issues in this region from a shared and collective vantage point. As a new member to the Fairfax County Board of Supervisors, I never would have imagined that the #1 issue that we would be facing in the early months of our tenure would have been COVID-19. It is extraordinary that we have the Council of Governments to serve as a place for sharing information, particularly on some of our health response, developing recommendations on openings and reopenings. I recognize that this is important to ensure that we are making decisions that are in the collective interest of this region. I also appreciate that we have members that share their jurisdictional challenges and experiences, which reminds us that we are not alone in the issues that we are facing. The area of Fairfax County that I represent has a significant number of challenges. We have a higher incident of unemployment. We have lower educational attainment in some areas. We lack access to quality medical care, and we have some of the highest rates of Title I students in our area as well. These disparities were in existence prior to COVID-19 and have only been magnified as a result of this pandemic. While all of these issues are extremely important, I'll say over the past 5 months, I've been very focused on food insecurity. Via private sector, nonprofit, county, and also our federal partners, we have hosted weekly food distributions that have served over 32,000 families, providing them with a week's supply of dairy, produce, and other meat products. Understanding that food insecurity will continue to be an issue going forward, I appreciate the work that COG is doing to address this issue from a regional perspective. Lastly, I want to acknowledge the leadership that COG is taking on protecting the environment and ensuring that the region reaches its goal of zero gashouse emissions by 2050. Much like the disparities that have been highlighted under the current public health crisis, climate change is poised to be the equity crisis of the future. I want to thank COG and our region and believe that it's well situated to mitigate these effects. There are so many other areas where COG is making a difference. I look forward to my continued service on this board and anticipate that I will be able to develop stronger relationships with many of the members here as we move into a post-COVID world. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Supervisor Lusk. Thank you for your service and look forward to your continued zeal and desire for serving on this board. Let me first check to see, I didn't see in my role Mayor Adams from the city of Bowie. Just let me check to see if Mayor Adams has joined us. And seeing that Mayor Adams is not on, let me turn to Prince William County Supervisor Andrea Bailey. Supervisor Bailey?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Mayor Adams?
Yeah, this is Mayor Adams.
Oh, great. I apologize. I didn't see you in my queue. So the floor is yours. New member, floor is yours.
Yes, first and foremost, I want to let everyone know that, yes, the most common comment I've received this year is, "You're on mute, please unmute." We've all experienced that. And so I apologize to the chairman and to the rest of the COG board for taking a moment to do that. I just want to be really quick about this and just say, as a new member to COG, there are issues that have come before us that I have been able to take before our city council to the city of Bowie and really advance us. I think one of the things that I've learned from COG is perspective. And what I mean by that is I have been able to get so many different perspectives on issues and how to present them that as a newly elected mayor, as a new member of the COG board, it has really enhanced my ability to serve our community. There have been issues that have been difficult for us to deal with. But I want to thank COG for taking the lead and helping people like myself, new not just to the board, but to as being an elected official. There is no way I would have been as insightful to my community had it not been for the COG board. And from everything from the insights and the information on the pandemic to one of the issues that has resonated around our country as well, and that's Black Lives Matter. And COG was willing to address that and take a step forward. And that has meant so much, not only to our community, but what we've done in the whole region and what we've contributed to the national dialogue about it. And for many of us, it helped us to have a foundation to lay for those coming behind us about addressing those issues. I'm fortunate in that I've also been able to reach out to so many different COG members, and I say to you, thank you. Because without your insights, I could have gone down the wrong track, but it's always good to have people who have that insight and are willing to share. And that's the one thing I've learned from COG is the ability to just share insights and thoughts and to be reflective about what you do. As the preceding newbie to the COG board said, there's so many issues you've taken the lead on, but I just want to say thank you to you. And that's my insight, because at first for me, it was like drinking water through a fire hose. There were so many issues coming and so much homework you had to do to catch up to where you were. But it was worth it. And thank you for all of those, and you know who you are, for me having to reach out and saying, okay, what does that mean? What is that? And you responded, and you taking the calls. And I hope that that's something that will continue is for some of us, the newbies, as I refer to it, that you'll continue to take our calls and you'll continue to let us learn from you. And on that note, I have to say to Chairman, I am fortunate that you are a colleague who is also from Prince George's County, but who has also been willing to lead in a lot of other ways. And to all the board, my insight right now is just one of appreciation, and just say thank you again. And again, my apologies on taking a moment to be able to unmute.
No problem at all, Brother Adams. I'm so glad that we didn't miss that, because that does our heart well, to know that listening as we have, committed to and working together in the spirit of co-opetition, is permeating our jurisdictions and also becoming foundationally how we look at it across the board, and from the perspective of a continuing relationship. Because as we graduate to our next responsibilities, it's going to be incumbent upon folks like Brother Adams, as well as Supervisor Lusk, and who's about to speak, Ms. Bailey, to carry on these traditions. And I say that from the perspective of knowing that I'm a term limited council member. And so, this regional co-opetition is something that I've cherished since the day I stepped on the COG board, and I look forward to you guys carrying on. So thanks again, Brother Adams. Thanks for listening, and thanks for also sharing your wisdom. Supervisor Bailey, are you prepared?
I am, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's a pleasure to be here with you and with my illustrious colleagues this afternoon. I want to say 4 things. Number one, I want to piggyback on what my brother said from Prince George's County. Thank you. Thank you for your leadership in all respects. My colleagues, your guidance, my chair, your laughter. I shall never forget our meeting at the top of the elevator stairs when we had the first meeting, and I didn't even know why I was there. And you spoke life into my leadership. And I'm so appreciative for the intentional inference that you had in the prayer that you offered me at the top of that escalator. So I just wanted to share that personal moment with everyone. Then next, I want to say guideposts. We are the guideposts regionally to not just our districts, but to our region and to our counties, and helping the transition of that. And so thirdly, with that, the intentionality in which COG does that is just simply amazing to me. We are very, very much intentional about changing the complexities and the growth in our area to make this a better place regionally to live. And that intentionality inspires me. And then lastly, I want to say from a generational standpoint, And Mr. Chairman, you just mentioned that about what we need to do to pass the baton, but make sure that it's a holistic baton. And so I feel that I have been included in this process to make the world a better world in which we live in this region. And so I'm very grateful, as my brother said before, I'm very grateful for everyone on this call for embracing me, making me feel a part of, and not feel so green as a new supervisor in Prince William County. So thank you very much for the opportunity to speak.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so very much for those kind words. And I try to walk it as I talk it. And that can only be done when you're led by the Spirit. So, and I ain't ashamed to say it. Brother Adams, appreciate you. Supervisor Lusk, looking forward to it. And Supervisor Bailey, thank you again. Are there any other new members, or as already established, and as I call them in Prince George's County, any newbies who'd like to make a comment at this time? Going once, gone. All right. So, okay, thank you all for those insights. We look forward to continue working together and maybe one day even getting to see each other in person. Maybe without hugs, maybe with masks, but maybe we'll get back together one day soon in person. It's an optimistic perspective that I think we all can take after last week. Let me move on to something that you'll be getting today, hopefully by the close of business. One of the duties, the board's responsibilities, is to complete a performance review of its executive director, even in a year like no other before it, or perhaps even more so because it's been such a challenging year. We have a committee to spearhead that, but full board input is important. Let me say it again. Full board input is important. In years past, often we didn't get full boards surveys back. We've gotten better and better each year, and I'm hoping this year to get as many surveys back as we possibly can when they are sent out. I hope by the end of the day to you. All right, we have a commitment to spearhead that. The full board input is critical. Toward that end, I will send you a survey this afternoon that I'd like you to complete. It's about 11 short questions, and I'm giving you up to about 11 days to complete the survey. I will compile the results and convene the committee in December, and we will bring the results and our recommendations to you in January. So look for the survey today, complete it and return it to me as soon as you can. I think the date that we're trying to get them back by is about the 20th. Beyond the survey, if you have additional feedback, please feel free to contact me or the other members of the executive committee, Vice Chair Dorsey and Vice Chair White, directly. So look for that survey. It'll be coming from me. If you get it back to me as quickly as you can, it's certainly appreciative. And so this is what we do to essentially assess the performance of our executive director, Mr. Bean, and we do it each year. So what I'd like to do is to move. I've already gone 5 minutes overtime with all of my early filibusters. So now let me turn the meeting over to Mr. Bean to give his updates for the executive director's report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the first-year board members for your insights. Much appreciated. I think as Monica brings up my slide deck, I'm going to call on Conti in just a moment, and then on Jenny, who supports our Chief Health Officers Committee. Conti is going to be giving an update on the TPB approval of the greenhouse gas emission reduction targets by 2030, and also speak to the importance of integrated planning, how transit-oriented communities, housing, and greenhouse gas reduction goals all need to go hand in hand, and ideally there's synergy between them. So I think as we're bringing up the slide deck, Conti, I think I'd ask you to just begin. We have a new target of 50% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions by 2030. So Conti.
Thank you, Chuck, and thank you, Mr. Chairman, and members of the board for the opportunity for this update. As Monica brings up this slide, just a refresher that last month you all adopted an interim goal that you now see on the screen, a greenhouse gas reduction goal. This slide deck on the screen shows all of the goals that we have. That goes all the way up to 2050. The newest goal is an interim goal for 2030. Next slide. So I'm happy to report that on October 21st, following your action, the Transportation Planning Board unanimously endorsed the new interim greenhouse gas reduction goals for 2030. Given that vehicles on the roadways is a significant source of greenhouse gases, I believe it is indeed very good that the region's long-range transportation planning body, the TPB, endorsed this important and urgent regional priority. I'm also glad to report that the TPB is closely following the discussions and the work of a consortium of 12 mid-Atlantic states and the District of Columbia to identify strategies within the transportation sector that would reduce greenhouse gas emissions. This consortium, it's called the Transportation and Climate Initiative, has representatives of the governors of Maryland and Virginia, as well as the representative of the mayor of the District of Columbia. In fact, Maryland's Deputy Transportation Secretary is the co-chair of this group. So that bodes really well for the transportation sector leaning in to what strategies are available to help reduce greenhouse gases within that sector. This latest action of the TPB endorsing COG's greenhouse gas reduction goals, as well as COG's regional resiliency goals, I see it as a continuation of the coordinated efforts of the different policy committees here at COG to achieve regional goals. I also see it as really a recognition that many of our regional important goals involve multiple sectors. And as such, an integrated multi-sector effort is needed for us to achieve our goals. Next slide, please. So a couple of recent examples of this multi-sector coordination and cooperation amongst the different policy boards at COG are when TPB noted that WMATA was facing a structural funding issue that needed to be addressed. The TPB was looking at it from a transportation infrastructure state of good repair perspective. COG board took up the matter, recognizing that a dedicated source of funding was needed for WMATA. As a regional transit agency, it is the backbone of the economic development, mobility, accessibility in an equitable manner. Similarly, now to attain the 2030 climate goal of reducing greenhouse gases by 50% below 2005 levels, those of us working in the energy sector or in the built environment, including land use, or in the transportation sector, will all have to work together as each develops their long-range plans. So, for example, one of the greenhouse gas reduction strategies is zero-emission vehicles, right? So, to help change the vehicle fleet that is in this region, both personal automobiles as well as commercial and heavy-duty truck fleet, to change that fleet from a fossil fuel-based fleet to zero-emission vehicles, we will need to work closely with the energy sector to ensure that the supply of clean energy for charging the electric vehicles are at transit garages, for example, and that could involve distributed renewable energy systems, high power supply lines, transformers. There are also potential updates that would be needed to the policies and practices in designing the private and public garages or curbside uses if we anticipate having more electric vehicles operating in this region. Similarly, as we work on our housing goals by concentrating development in activity centers and near transit stations, we should be recognizing that that is an opportunity for us to begin using microgrids and to ensure that building designs are such that they are energy efficient and the electrical supply and preserving tree canopies, all of which are strategies to help reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So it is in this way that when we work on any one sector, if we can be intentional and mindful of the collateral and co-benefits of advancing regional goals, that is what an integrated multi-sector regional planning represents. And as the policy boards have indicated a willingness to do that, we here within COG as a staff, we are committed to ensuring that the staff work is reflective of this integrated multi-sector plan. So that's just my thoughts and my update on this. Turn it back to you, Chuck.
Thank you. There was a lot there, and we'll be unpacking that in the months to come, but the importance of synergy between planning for housing, planning for transit, and achieving our greenhouse gas emission targets, I think, is the core here. Moving on to pressing issue of COVID cases, I'm going to turn it to Jenny Sheeter. She supports the Chief Health Officers Committee. Can you talk about collaboration amongst the jurisdictions and also an update on cases? Jenny Sheeter.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm happy to provide you with this brief update for COVID-19. As I presented to you previously, after meeting weekly since June, DC, Maryland, Virginia, and West Virginia are able to securely exchange information on individuals who need contact tracing. This is through a partnership with Association of Public Health Laboratories, APHL, using their AIMS platform. In addition, this group of epidemiologists continue to see a benefit of touching base weekly to overcome regional challenges. This includes a way to securely share live files during regional outbreaks as situations can evolve rapidly. Also developing protocols for exchanging workplace exposure notifications while ironing out the roles and responsibilities for each jurisdiction. So moving on, during the Health Officials Committee meeting on Monday, health officials expressed concern with the rising number of COVID cases in the region. This is especially concerning as people are experiencing COVID fatigue as well, causing more people to begin gathering in small groups, and this is leading into the holiday season. Health officials continue to emphasize the need to wear masks, the importance of the flu shot, and the need to stay vigilant during the pandemic for yourself and for those around us. So with that, I'm going to bring it back over to you, Chuck.
Thank you. I'm sure there'll be many questions. You can direct those to me offline, and we'll give you more updates on the work of health officers and our coordination with the CAOs and the public information officers about common messages. Next slide, please. The next slide is about housing. You may remember Dr. Tiffany Manuel, Dr. T. She was a keynote speaker at the COG retreat in 2018. I would say that she's a master communicator about the importance of housing, and we've been working with Greater Washington Partnership, Washington grant makers, enterprise community partners, et cetera, to see if we can get the same messaging platform, same communications vehicle about the importance of housing in the region. So you're all invited to an event for the release of this housing messaging playbook on November 17th at 1 p.m. I think staff will drop the link to that event in the chat. Next slide, please. And with some pleasure, but some chagrin, I announced that Steve Walz is going to be retiring from the COG staff. Steve is an esteemed leader. We were able to get him after his great service to the Commonwealth of Virginia when Tim Kaine was governor. He was the governor's energy policy advisor, and he was the director of regional energy planning for the Northern Virginia Regional Commission. When I knew that he dealt with coal mining and uranium mining in Virginia, I thought, well, any issue that we're dealing with, he's going to be able to deal with that complexity through science and diplomacy, and he has. It's been a great half dozen years for Steve with the Council of Governments, and with the passage of these targets for 2030 for greenhouse gas emissions, I wouldn't say that he's going out with a bang, but I would say that he is going out green. Steve, would you be willing to say a few words?
Well, thank you very much. For the opportunity to work with you, your peers on your boards and your councils, as well as the staff at all your localities. I couldn't have thought of a better place to, having spent the more than the last 6.5 years working on these things. I think we've been able to do a lot together and set the stage for a lot more to happen moving forward. Conti, talk about our work to better integrate metropolitan planning, and with this integration and with the strong staff that are here at COG and at your localities, I think the environmental programs work will go on strong, and look forward to seeing many new and great things coming as you continue this work going forward. So thank you very much.
And with that, Chairman Davis, I will turn it back to you. I wish that we were in person to give Steve a round of applause, but I'll give him the
Everybody, let's give Steve the wave. And we appreciate Steve and all of his commitment and work. And we look forward to not losing communication with Steve as this time moves on. Thank you so very much. All right, Mr. Bean, seeing that we've dealt with the agenda, dealt with the executive director's report, looks like we're at amendments to the agenda. Are there any amendments to our agenda? All right, hearing none, we'll move on to the next item. And the next item is approval of the minutes from October 14th, 2020. Is there a motion and a second to approve the minutes from October 14th board meeting?
Penny Gross moves approval.
Second, Supervisor Bailey.
Thank you. So we have a motion appropriately made by Ms. Gross, seconded by Supervisor Bailey. Are there any abstentions or nay votes? Hearing none, I'll take all as in the column of yay, and the motion passes. So let me move on to our consent agenda. Today, we have 5 resolutions on the consent agenda. They are in your binder, and if in fact there is a need for them, I don't believe there's a need for them to be read aloud, as all of my members have received their packets. Is there a motion and a second to approve these items for the consent agenda?
Penny Gross moves approval of the consent agenda.
And Mayor Newton seconds.
Thank you. There's an appropriate motion and a second made by Ms. Gross, seconded again by Supervisor Bailey. Is there any need for discussion? And seeing no need for discussion, are there any abstentions or nay votes? Hearing none, the motion passes. Moving on, and nope, not quite made up my time yet. We're in FY 2020 year-end financial report. Moving in item 7, I invite COG Secretary Treasurer Kate Stewart and COG Chief Financial Officer Julie Mussog to brief us on the fiscal year 2020 year-end financial report. Let me turn it over to Mayor Stewart.
Great, thank you, Chair.
Hey, Kate.
Hi. The year's end financial report for fiscal year 2020 is in your board packet starting at page 17, and it shows the results for the fiscal year that ended on June 30th, 2020. This is an interim unaudited report prepared by management. The audited financial statements will be presented to the board at the January meeting. I've reviewed the financial information with COG's Chief Financial Officer, and I'm going to turn it over to her in a moment for additional details and questions. But I do want to just thank again Ms. Muskog for all her work on this. She reminded me this week as we were going over the financials that she hasn't even been with COG yet for a whole year, and the work she is doing under these extraordinary circumstances has just been terrific. So I want to thank her for all her work and turn it over to her for more details.
Thank you. That was very kind. And I have to say that I've very much enjoyed my time at COG this past year and working with the board. And fortunately, I have good news to report for FY20 fiscal year end. Revenue from all sources totaled about 40.5 million, of which it's 3.6 million ahead of the budget that was approved by the board for FY20. This increase was due to an additional 1.7 million in federal pass-through funds and 2 million in federal and state revenues that were unbudgeted. The increase in pass-through funds is primarily related to the Urban Area Security Initiative program of about 2.3 million that was not budgeted. And this was partially offset by the lower than budgeted funds received for enhanced mobility and WMATA fire chiefs. The additional federal and state revenue of 2 million was driven by funding. Half of it was driven by funding from the Department of Health for public health planning projects, and the bulk of the remainder was federal funds for repower projects and some additional funds for U.S. Army Corps of Engineer project, as well as Anacostia restoration funds. The additional revenue resulted in additional expenditures as well, so that accounts for about 2 million of the 2.1 million of negative variance to the budget for FY20. Overall, expenditures exceeded revenues by $354,900, of which 544,400 was covered by spending down restricted program funds that were received in prior years. So the net remaining positive balance when you put those together is 189,500, and this is the amount of surplus that affects COG's bottom line. This surplus was a result of higher than anticipated investment income and unrealized gains, plus lower general fund support needs for projects due to conscious efforts by staff to achieve savings. Some of these savings are one-time, and some of them are permanent ongoing savings that we've been working very hard on for the past year to try to get in line. Overall, COG remains financially healthy with board-designated capital and operating reserves funded at 100% with balances of 5.2 million each. I'll be happy to try to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Ms. Muskog, and thank you, Kate, for that report. I appreciate that update. Sounds like I have someone who still has their mic open, or was that a question? All right. Seeing none, I'll continue to move on to agenda item 8 and invite our Vice Chair, Mr. Dorsey, who is chairing this year's Legislative Committee, to lead us in a discussion on COG's legislative priorities for year 2021. Mr. Dorsey.
Thank you, Chair Davis. How is everyone this afternoon? So at the October board meeting of the COG board, we appointed representatives from the COG board, as well as the Transportation Planning Board and the Region Forward Coalition, along with each of our policy committees, to serve on the 2021 Legislative Committee. Over the next month, COG staff will be working with each of the policy committees to review the priorities that are developed and put forward recommendations ultimately to the Legislative Committee. That committee will be convened during the first week of December, in just a couple of weeks, to discuss and review the ideas so that we can ultimately present to the COG board a document for approval at the January meeting. Today, we wanted to provide an opportunity for the COG board to provide their input before all of this detailed work gets done. These legislative priorities, just as a reminder, are both for our respective state legislatures as well as the federal government to consider. And of course, since we have an upcoming transition of the executive branch of the federal government coming in 2021, and rest assured, I think we all in this region understand that that transition will occur, despite what is being said elsewhere. We want to make sure that those priorities that come from our region are communicated and widely known. In our Read Ahead board packet, there is a document that contains the 2020 legislative priorities. I think that's on page 22. And we focus these priorities into several different subject heading areas: transportation, water and climate and air quality, as well as housing and economic resources, and health and human services, as well as emergency preparedness. Now, of course, this year, the COG board has made a particular focus on racial equity. So seeing that be included in our legislative priorities is something that we will be discussing and are certainly keen to do. And of course, we are all affected by the ongoing pandemic, which will very much inform our priorities moving forward. And there are a number of other areas that COG board members have discussed and offered in various other forums. Those include, of course, greenhouse gas emissions, subject of work with us in the TPB, as well as storm water, with a focus not on water quality, which is what we have historically done, but also just actual storm water prevention and relief and other initiatives. And so with that, the floor is to the COG board to provide opportunities for input on our legislative priorities, discuss what's important in your jurisdictions, and what should be important from a regional perspective.
Mr. Chairman, this is Chair Randall. Can I chime in?
Yes, of course, Chair Randall. How are you?
I'm very good, Mr. Dorsey. I hope everyone's doing well. And I, as always, I look forward to actually seeing you all again in person, hopefully early next year. Mr. Chairman, and I don't know if COG is the right vehicle, but I think it might be to talk about the next gen 911 system. I know that many of you are aware that there was an incident in June where there was a 911 call that originated in Loudoun County on our side of the Potomac River, in fact, in Loudoun County, that bounced to the 911 in Montgomery County, Maryland, and it created quite a bit of confusion. In the end, the young man lost his life. Now, I will say that the confusion didn't cause the loss of life. But the confusion did cause, I think, increased pain and suffering for his family. And so what we've learned is that you have to have a 911 system where when calls bounce off, the calls track back to the GPS and not just to the closest cell tower, because the closest cell tower could be in Maryland, or the closest cell tower could be in Virginia, or in West Virginia, and you're standing in Virginia. So I don't know if that's something that would go in a legislative program, because we want to see, one, support, and two, possible funding for that 911 for the next gen 911 system. That may sit in federal legislation. And then I talked to my Congresswoman Jennifer Wexton. She said there may be some federal funds, or it might sit in state bodies for state funds. But either way, because we have such, the states are, the 911 system pings off of different places in different states. I thought it was something that COG should discuss. I will also say that since that incident, there has been some discussion in our in COG's first responders. I don't know what Scott might be on the call. I'm not sure what the term is, to talk about the fact that no matter where a call bings to, that the closest locality will go, even if it's in the Potomac, and Maryland thinks it's their water. If it's in Fairfax will go. If it's in Loudoun will go. If it's in Montgomery County, they will go. But there is quite a bit of confusion around this with this system.
Mr. Darcy, I'd be happy to respond to Chair Randall. This is Chuck Bean.
Thank you.
I think that would be entirely appropriate to be part of our legislative priorities. I think part of the puzzle here is coordination, and that can be taken up by our 911 Directors Committee. So I think we could get a briefing from that committee to the board on the status of next generation 911. Other issues about computer-aided dispatch, computer-aided response. across jurisdictional boundaries also can be taken up. So there's one level on coordination, what is, but from a legislative priority, where Maryland is going with next generation 911, and then Senator Kagan from Montgomery County has been a leader in that. I want to make sure that the district is going the same direction and Virginia is going the same direction. And if there's an opportunity, if next generation 911 is characterized as infrastructure, there might be a federal role too. So I think it would be entirely appropriate to take this up.
Mr.
Thank
Dorsey,
you. I appreciate
Mr. Dorsey,
that.
take yourself off mute.
Thank you. I think someone muted me. I was talking too much, I suppose, right? So thank you very much, Mr. Bean. Are there any other board members who want to offer ideas for consideration as part of our 2021 priorities?
Mr. Dorsey, Dave Snyder, just a couple comments. I think we ought to, in addition to dividing our program up into these separate categories, we might consider another category being an infrastructure, a federal infrastructure program. What would we reasonably advocate for consideration in an infrastructure program that would meet the values and objectives in the region? So I would suggest that as maybe even another component to the legislative program, and it may combine elements that are already there. And I wanted to also support the comment that was made about Next Gen 911, but also the ability to have redundant capabilities should one provider fail. And we know there's some history with that in the region as well. And I agree with your comment about stormwater funding. That's a huge issue. The whole issue of flooding and what do we do about these 100-year storms that are now occurring about every year. That even if you're not close to the river, you're seeing incredible flooding. So I think that's an issue about how we address that as well. And finally, I'm convinced that it's going to be extremely difficult for a region to meet the goals that you just heard talked about in the area of climate and transportation without a vigorous federal partnership. So that's another key point to make. Thank you very much for your work on the program.
Thank you so much, Councilman Snyder. I think I certainly personally associate myself as being in strong agreement with you on those priorities and making sure that those are communicated thoughtfully, clearly, and loudly, given where our region is. And just to piggyback on what you were saying with infrastructure, not that I have any advance or inside knowledge, but if past is prologue and we see any kind of deal on infrastructure that's of a scale and scope like what then Vice President Biden managed with the Recovery Act, it's going to be very much important that our region and the jurisdictions therein are ready to go with developed projects that can take advantage of any opportunity. So thank you for calling that out.
Vice Chair Dorsey, looked like Mr. Bean might have had something he was trying to add. I didn't know if you were able to see it. He's good to go.
I'm good. Thank you. Others, and by all means, people feel free to use the chat if you would like to put down ideas that you don't necessarily want to articulate on camera. Any other members?
Hi, this
Just
is
jump right in since I can't see everybody.
Hi, this is Kate Stewart, Mayor in Tacoma Park. Just want to underscore under the Health and Human Services, the increase of an access to mental health services. And how important that is, particularly it was at a crisis level before COVID, and what we are seeing now under COVID, and as many of our jurisdictions are, reevaluating and thinking about and reimagining public safety, the role of and how we are providing mental health services in our communities is vital at this time. So I just wanted to lift that up, and so glad to see it as part of the priorities. Thank you.
Terrific. Thank you, Mayor Stewart. Anyone else? Not that I'm fishing, but you know, I know a lot of our communities are having various conversations about law enforcement, specifically policing. I know that there's a lot of turnover in you know, among the leaders of police departments in the region, and I don't necessarily have anything in mind. But are there any priorities that are going to be going to various state houses this year from your jurisdictions in the area of policing and law enforcement that might be of a regional or that might have a regional connection? All right, hearing none.
I'm sorry.
Mayor Adams.
Yeah, I just am not sure this is the forum, but it should be brought out that there are questions about the Policeman's Bill of Rights. And I think that may be going to maybe several houses. I know in Maryland, they're talking about that. And when we start talking about social justice, that's a big issue. And I believe we should take a look at how we play in that, or how we look at that, and what position we as a COG will be looking at and taking with that. So I did want to add that. Thank you.
Thank you.
This is Mayor Stewart again in Tacoma Park, Maryland, just to add, also in addition to the law enforcement officers' Bill of Rights, I know in Maryland we've been looking at public information as well as use of force and other items. So that might be things in the future look at regionally, particularly guidelines around use of force.
Excellent. Excellent. Okay.
Mr. Dorsey, Dave Snyder, one other question. COG dodged it a few years ago, but the issue of guns and gun violence.
All right. We will, you know what, thank you for bringing that up, Mr. Snyder, because we have certainly seen in Virginia an effort this year among multiple jurisdictions, including your own, mine, as well as the city of Alexandria, and I believe Fairfax County as well, with some new enabling authority to prohibit guns in certain places. You know, might be worth just doing a scan of seeing how we look regionally in terms of you know, the ability and legality of people carrying guns into our places, understanding that at least regional awareness is key to properly enforcing and educating people on those restrictions. Excellent. Other folks.
Mr. Dorsey, may I speak on that issue of the gun?
Always.
So, Mr. Snyder, thank you for saying that. We are having that discussion in Loudoun County right now about guns in county facilities. And one thing that, as we started having the discussion, I was asking, and I've been doing some research myself with all my free time, is there is in Loudoun County a probably a small but very, very vocal pushback against restricting guns in county buildings. And my question has been, firearms are not allowed in most federal buildings where where lawmakers reside, legislators reside. They're not, allowed in the Russell Senate office building. Obviously, they're not allowed in the White House. They're not allowed on the floor of Congress. They're also not allowed in most state house buildings. And so my question had been, not quite understanding why there was such a, why we would allow firearms in county buildings that we don't allow in state house or federal buildings, especially since we tend to have less security in county buildings. Not that we don't have fantastic security there, but it's less security, realizing that obviously the president's job is more important than mine. But I don't know, I would say the president's life is more important than mine. So, one thing that if I were to ask for help from COG is just that, to look regionally and see in what counties and in fact what states are firearms allowed in the government buildings. I'm not speaking of parks and open spaces. I'm talking about literally in the government buildings. And in those government buildings where they're not allowed, what's the practice? Are there magnetometers there? Is it just a sign on the wall that says don't bring them there? Because as we have this discussion, I would like to discuss what's happening on the regional level as far as firearms in government buildings. So thank you. And thank you, Mr. Snyder, for bringing that forward.
Thank you, Ms. Randall. And, maybe if that scan can be something that COG can complete, it might inform some legislative priorities that you offer within the Commonwealth of Virginia. I see Senator Barker's here. He's probably not at all happy about hearing other gun legislation that people will be looking to, but I can't tell because he's got his mask on. So I can't tell if he's happy or scared by that prospect. You're muted, George. We'll come back to Senator Barker if he has anything else.
All right. I got it now. So I got unmuted. So just following the mayor from Bowie. So, we did pass a good bit of gun legislation this year, and I had one myself that I've been carrying for 6 years and finally got passed this year. That basically goes by the name sort of the red flag law or the extreme risk protection order that has already been used extensively in Virginia to temporarily remove guns from someone who's a threat to use them in a short period of time. So it's been very successful thus far, and I think the response has generally been positive on what we did. We historically had guns in our legislative building. It's a General Assembly building in Richmond. This year, we did prohibit them in our temporary quarters for our offices, the Pocahontas building, because of some of the threats that were in place. And we had a tremendous response from the Capitol Police and State Police in providing protection, and no incidents occurred, even though there had been several threats that were made. So we will look at it and listen to everything that you have to say. So.
Thank you, George. All right. And we've got from Supervisor Bailey and Prince William that desire to add something as it relates to the conversation that we were having before about mental health and how it interacts with policing. And, I think certainly that's a big area of regional interest that we'll discuss and figure out how we include. Are there others? Okay, going once, going twice. I will close with just a couple of asks of you colleagues before we get to adopting the final document. If you could sort of think about the pandemic and what you've experienced in your local response to the pandemic, where there might be legislative fixes that could enable you to have better responded. If you could think about areas where you heard that you would be an outlier if you were to move in a certain area because nobody else in the region was or could do it. I really want you to think, clearly so that we are able to ensure that when the next pandemic comes, we are not searching for tools in order to respond on behalf of our constituents. And the second ask is that as your local jurisdictions develop your legislative priority documents, however you may do that, if you can ensure that we share that with COG, Ms. Baruti Nunez, Monica is coordinating this effort by COG. If you could make sure she gets those documents as they are produced so that we can, sort of cross-check and make sure that we're teasing out every significant priority that we need to organize and advocate around over the course of the next year. With that, Chairman, I turn it back to you with, I think, a few minutes of extra time.
Such a lifesaver as my vice chair. He knows how to save a filibuster every day. Thank you for that, and I'm looking forward to it. It sounds like a healthy a number of things that we as a board should contemplate. I have one or two in the back of my mind, but I'm going to let them marinate for just another moment because I think that the ones that we've put on the table are more critical, more timely just at this moment. So thanks again to everyone for their input, and we look forward to next year's agenda coming together. Let me continue on with the minutes we stole back and move to agenda item number 9, where we will hear from COG Human Services Policy Committee Chair Brianne Nadeau about the committee's progress in developing a collaborative agreement among participating jurisdictions to prevent and end homelessness in the region. Let me turn it over to you, Ms. Nadeau.
Thank you, Chairman. It's great to be with the full board today. Thank you so much. And I know some of our committee members are active members of the board, Penny Gross, Hector Sendejas, and Andrea Bailey, who will be our new Human Services Committee Chair in 2021. So Monica, if you could get me started on the next slide. Great. So throughout 2020, the Human Services Policy Committee has focused on homeless services, including a newly formed philanthropic partnership to end the experience of homelessness in the District of Columbia, and recent efforts to support regional cooperation in homeless services throughout the Metro Washington region. We took 2 site visits at the beginning of the year before we were no longer able to gather. We first went to the short-term family housing site in the District of Columbia, the AYA, which is one of the 8 buildings that we have put together for families experiencing homelessness. It was part of our plan to shut down DC General, which was, of course, an old hospital that became a place where homeless families were living. And now we have this beautiful, dignified housing for homeless families all across the city. And we also went to the Lamb Center, which is a daytime homeless drop-in center in Fairfax, Virginia, which was a great opportunity for us to see a model of serving people in a holistic way and connecting them to services in a space that's welcoming and supported by community members. Then we continued our journey virtually by hearing a presentation from Community of Hope, which is one of the partners in the District of Columbia that runs many of our short-term family shelters. But also they taught us about their 2-generation model, which works with parents and children in families at the same time, meeting their distinct needs as 2 different generations, but also with the goal of helping them stabilize and really bounce back from the experience of having been homeless and move into a stable long-term situation. We also received national and local perspectives on how jurisdictions should approach developing strategic plans. So we heard from a national leader on homelessness who lives right here in the region, and we heard from several of the jurisdictions on their strategic planning processes. We also spent time this summer reviewing the regional 2020 point-in-time results with further discussions on the undercounted populations. So we spent some time thinking about how we are counting youth in particular, and how we are counting immigrant populations, to populations that we know experience homelessness, but may not be counted in the same way in the point-in-time count, and how we can find them and how we work to do that with our community partners. Next slide, please. This year's been a full year of learning throughout a challenging and unpredictable 2020. And given the many challenges of 2020, we understand our homeless services within our jurisdictions are particularly stretched with resources. However, given the current need and additional individuals being at risk of losing their homes, it's all the more important for us to come together regionally to support this need. With input from the HSPC subgroup, which included Councilmember Evan Glass from Montgomery County, Councilmember Matt DeFerranti from Arlington County, our incoming chair, Andrea Bailey from Prince William County, and Renee Pope from Prince George's County, we developed a list of items to include within a regional agreement. And since then, both the HSPC and the COG Human Services Committee, Homeless Services Committee, members have been providing additional review and guidance on such an agreement, with the draft to be reviewed and approved by our committee tomorrow. So we're not asking you to do anything today, but listen. And once the Human Services Committee adopts our proposal, we'll be back before you next year. Next slide, please. Thank you. We do understand that some jurisdictions may be stretched, especially thin at this point, and therefore this compact is open to jurisdictions who are both interested and able to participate, allowing for additional jurisdictions to sign on over time. And our committee's goal is for the region to work together collaboratively to prevent and end the experience of homelessness. To achieve this goal, the HSPC has proposed a regional vision and mission. So you see that up there on the slide before you. So our vision to create a cross-jurisdictional, client-centered approach, person-centered approach to ending the experience of homelessness by identifying and breaking down barriers to get people the resources they need. We know people move across jurisdictions when they're experiencing homelessness and even when they're not. And the goal is to ensure that anyone experiencing homelessness in the Metro Washington region gets the services they need in a way that is most supportive of them. Meaning, you know, if they feel like moving back to the District of Columbia where they grew up is going to be the best place for them to thrive, then we want to support them to do that. If they feel moving near their cousins in Prince George's County is going to be the best way for them to thrive, we want them to be able to do that. So it really, in order to achieve these goals, it is so critical that we are collaborating on a regular basis, not just about policy, but about individual cases and human beings that we serve. Our mission, by openly sharing and analyzing data across jurisdictions and coordinating cases, we can identify gaps in both emergency shelter and housing and effectively advocate for resources to bring an end to homelessness in the Washington metro region. So I'm going to go to the next slide. And, you know, really just think about this as I get into this slide is the point in time count every year is one of probably the most major collaboration we have as a region around homelessness. But we know that that gives us a baseline. We know it's not perfect, but it doesn't tell us much more than who we think is homeless. It doesn't illustrate for us where the gaps are in our services. It doesn't illustrate for us where the gaps are in housing. And we need to get to that place in order to really end homelessness in the region. So to achieve our regional vision, the HSPC is recommending jurisdictions consider implementing the following actions. First is data sharing. We would expand an existing data sharing agreement that's currently among Prince George's, Montgomery, and the District of Columbia to include all COG jurisdictions. We would institute regular reporting and develop a regional protocol to ensure consistent reporting of key metrics to demonstrate the true regional need for housing resources. This, of course, fits in very well with what the board did last year around housing goals. We would institute regional tracking and case coordination, where we develop a regional protocol to identify residents who may be on multiple coordinated entry priority lists for permanent housing to most efficiently resolve a person's experience of homelessness. Just to say that in a more plain way, if somebody's on my wait list in the District of Columbia and they're also on your wait list in Montgomery County, we should know that. So we can figure out which wait list it really most benefits them and make sure we're not double counting the need, that we're cooperating on resources, et cetera. We also are recommending residency requirements be aligned across the jurisdiction so that we can ensure people are better able to have their housing needs met. Some jurisdictions have residency requirements, some don't, some have spent a lot of time on them, some haven't. We just want to be more aligned because that way we can also better direct resources. And finally, I want to lift up some work that's being done that we want to continue, which is racial equity. With the assistance of outside consultants, prepare a region-wide homeless systems audit to ensure that efforts to prevent and end homelessness are grounded in race equity and existing structural inequities are not compounded within the current systems of care. You know, I don't think we can possibly reiterate that enough through the work we do in COG. We always have the best of intentions, but we need to know for sure that we're not doing any harm as we implement new policies and we're not furthering the equity gap among African Americans in the District of Columbia in particular. We're always thinking about this, and we know it's an issue all across the region. So tomorrow, my committee, the Human Services Policy Committee, will be taking up this proposal officially. And then we will bring it back to the full COG board in early 2021 as a formal proposal to be adopted, sort of like a regional compact around homelessness, as we've done with housing, as we've done with Metro. I think this is a long time coming. I can't say enough about the incredible amount of work that's being done at the staff level at the Homeless Services Committee at COG. And the reason that I took this up this year as chair is because I felt it was critical that we as elected leaders really elevated that work of the staff to drive it forward. Unless the politicians decide that this is a priority, the staff can work on it all day long. But we really need to be leading here as well as the elected leaders and the appointed leaders. So I'm happy to take any questions. I love doing this work. I'm chair of the Human Services Committee for the DC Council as well. I can answer any questions you have about any of the journey we took this year or the proposal that we are putting together. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Ms. Nadal, thank you so much for that very thorough report. Let me turn to colleagues to see if there are any questions, and let me do it from the perspective of jurisdictions. Let me start in the state of Virginia to see if there are any questions or things they'd like to add to Ms. Nadal's report.
Mr. Chair.
That is trying to see who that is being recognized. Mr. Snyder?
Yeah, yes, sir. Thanks.
Please, please.
I also belong to HSPC, and we discussed this at our city council meeting Monday night along with staff, and we're very supportive of the overall initiative. However, there were some concerns about Virginia privacy law may not permit signing off on the agreement that has been in place between Maryland and DC. So we may ask, well, we will ask tomorrow that at least with the data sharing, any action be significantly and substantively generic, so we can work through jurisdictional differences in what data that can be shared and when. And I'd ask Brianna Nadeau if she's agreeable and amenable to sort of approaching it from that standpoint.
Thank you so much. Great to see you. Thank you. I apologize for not mentioning you also as one of our committee members. Oh, good. Thank you. I want to see everybody's faces. Of course, I'm very amenable to that. We certainly want as much participation as possible. Certainly, you'll see tomorrow, and the board will see in 2021 that the language in here is not going to be overly prescriptive. It is meant to be the nudge and the roadmap to getting us towards better collaboration.
Thank you there, Mr. Snyder. So let me turn to, is that Ms. Newton? So I'll turn to Marilyn. Bridget?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I just really want to add my support to this. I'm so pleased, Ms. Nandau, to have this happen. I think the regional perspective on this and the ability for all of us to work together to really make a difference is the way to go forward. And I just want to say thank you. I was concerned as a member from Montgomery County as a member of the group. So somebody can help me. If that needs to be someone maybe from the city of Rockville, or if Montgomery County is going to do it, but we definitely want to be part of this. We have a new director of housing in the city just about 3 or 4 months ago. I think she was appointed. So we too want to be part of this solution. Thank you.
Thank you. That's so great to hear. And just to clarify, that small working group was really just to make sure that we had enough buy-in from our committee to move this forward. But of course, it will be expanded to every jurisdiction. And again, I do think the language is going to be, I hate to say generic because it's very important to me, and generic is just not a word that gives it enough weight, but it'll be amenable to folks so that they can adopt it in a way that works for their jurisdictions.
Yeah, it has to be impactful if we're going to make a difference. So thank you.
Chair Davis, you're muted.
Vice Chair Dorsey, they got me this time. So let me say to Ms. Nadeau again, thank you so much for that. And this is an issue that we know that's going to come back in early 2021, asking for the board to endorse. So this agreement is based on the current collaboration between the district, Prince George's, and Montgomery County, now opening it up to VA as well. So we look forward to this coming back. Appreciate you and stay strident.
Thank you so much. Thanks everybody for your hard work.
So colleagues, now we're going to move on to item number 10. And this is our last item for the day. And I think with the Vice Chair and I, we've stolen about 8 minutes to talk, extra minutes for this important discussion. So it's from the DC Department of Health, Senior Deputy Director of Health Emergency Preparedness and Response, Patrick Ashley. He'll brief us on the status of our regional planning for distribution of a COVID-19 vaccine. Timely and definitely topic of the day. So without further ado, let me turn it over to Mr. Ashley.
Thanks, Mr. Davis. Can you hear me okay?
Absolutely.
Great. Well, thanks for the opportunity to come back before the board and talk a little bit about vaccine. I know it's a topic of interest. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Patrick Ashley. I'm one of the senior deputy directors at DC Health, responsible for their health emergency preparedness program. So today I'm going to provide mainly a broad stroke overview and really talk in some general terms, not specifically about DC or Maryland, but really just about the vaccine development and where we are. And the reason for that is really that there's a lot of unknowns about vaccine. This is the fastest vaccine development in history, not just for the United States, but also worldwide. With that being said, there's a lot of stuff that we don't know yet. There's a lot of information coming out via the media, but there's a lot of unknowns and there's a lot of vulnerabilities still for vaccine development. So the goal of vaccine, obviously, as many of you know, is really about to quote unquote train your body to be able to respond to COVID-19 and to be able to create some level of immunity. That being said, vaccines over the course of time produce some different levels of immunity. And so here the goal for the COVID vaccine has always been to be able to create some vaccine that is able to produce at least a 50% efficacy of creating immunity in the community. Excuse my rhyme there. And so as part of this process and Operation Warp Speed, as many of you have heard, there's a number of different types of vaccines being trialed from many different manufacturers all across the world. And really there's been huge amounts of government investments and many of the vaccine candidates. And some of the governments have already developed contract awards pre-approval for purchase of those vaccines once they're approved. So it's important to talk through very quickly the process of vaccine approval, just so we're all on the same page. So we start with the research and the preclinical testing, where very smart people get in a room together and talk through how they're going to attack this virus. And then we move on to phase 1, which is safety trials, which is where they test this on a very small number of people, just a handful of them, just to determine whether or not these vaccines are safe and whether or not there's any type of immediate outcomes. Then we move on to what's called phase 2, and that's expanded trials, where we start to test on hundreds of people to really understand how the vaccine is able to scale across the entire population, because individuals react differently based on a number of different factors. And the phase that most people have heard of most recently is really about phase 3, which are efficacy trials. And that's when we start to test in the thousands of people. So the vaccine candidate that has been in the news most recently is Pfizer. That one has about 40,000 people enrolled in its efficacy trial. That obviously doesn't cover the entire population, but it has to cover a segment of the population to make sure that we're really ensuring that we have a broad brush stroke of all of the individuals in the population with different pre-existing conditions, comorbidities, and the like. If after phase 3, it's determined that there is, at least 50% of the people who have received the vaccine, that it does provide some level of immunity, then it can move on to some sort of government approval or emergency use authorization. And it's also important to note here that you've probably seen as you followed along a number of times that vaccines will have a pause. And that's not anything bad. That's just because there's been some sort of outcome as part of the vaccine trials that they need to investigate a little bit more. So, for example, recently one of the vaccine trials were paused because an individual had a stroke. But that will be researched, and they find out that perhaps that individual had some other reason for that stroke that wasn't related to the vaccine. So once everything is approved and it's able to go to market either through an approval and emergency use authorization, the vaccine manufacturers as well as the government will continue to study that vaccine to really understand how that vaccine works over time. And as we move from, say, 40,000 people to millions of people, it's important just to understand how it's affecting the different populations. So as I mentioned previously, there's a number of vaccine candidates. There's a handful of them here in the U.S. that are currently in phase 3, which is great news. But the big news of recently is that Pfizer has produced documentation that showed that their vaccine was at least 90% effective out of some 43,000 participants. We also expect that another vaccine that's also being trialed right here in Washington, D.C., which is the Moderna vaccine, is going to be able to publish vaccination data or efficacy data, before the end of the month. So what that means is that Pfizer, being the first one up with the data, is looking to submit for what's called an emergency use authorization in the 3rd week of November. What that actually means is that there's not enough data probably for a full approval of that vaccine, but the federal government has the authority under emergency circumstances, as you've probably seen with some of the COVID therapeutics, to be able to issue an emergency use authorization, which is just short of a full approval, saying that it's safe for individuals because the greater good of the vaccine. What that actually means is that approval could come sometime late November, early December, and that we could actually, if all things go well, we could start to see some vaccine hitting the shelves per se sometime in December. Again, there's a lot of unknowns here, and so we sort of look at it with some cautious optimism. With regards to the vaccine, if we're specifically talking about Pfizer today, it looks like by the end of the year, some 12.5 million courses of vaccine will be available through Pfizer. It's actually closer to about 25 million, but the Pfizer vaccine requires 2 doses. And so we divide that in half to say somewhere around 12.5 million. Obviously, that doesn't allow for the entire population to be able to receive a vaccine. And the federal government in this circumstance controls the distribution of that vaccine and then provides allocations to each individual state. And so what the CDC and the federal government has asked is that each state create a draft vaccine plan that talks about how they'll allocate the vaccine. The requirement to submit that draft plan, as many of you are probably aware, has already passed. Each of the states have submitted that. And the CDC recently published executive summaries for every state that are available publicly. And some states have published their full draft plan. Other states have elected not to, just because of the draft nature. The other thing that the federal government will provide is the ancillary supplies and the distribution network to move these vaccines around the country. Both the Pfizer vaccine and the Moderna vaccine are very new types of vaccine called a messenger RNA vaccine. And so there's never actually been a fully approved vaccine that has used mRNA. The only other vaccine of recent note using mRNA was the Ebola vaccine, which was authorized under an emergency use authorization. And so with this vaccine being new, and the first two vaccines being very similar to each other, is going to require a bit of training. They also require very special handling. The doses are stored at, you've probably seen this before, but stored at negative 70 degrees Celsius. And so many healthcare institutions are not used to dealing with vaccines that are stored at those types of conditions. And so there's a lot of logistics that go into being able to plan for the distribution of these vaccines. As I mentioned before, both of these vaccines that are first up require a second round. Some of the future vaccines only require one dose. That's not to say that one vaccine works better than another. They all are different types of vaccine, and they all work differently. And so we'll have a lot of variability in the different types of vaccine that are out in the market. Sometime, in the early part of 2021, there may be 3, 4, or 5 different types of vaccine out there. And so that brings up a key challenge here that I want to talk about, is really about the vaccine hesitancy and encouraging individuals to get vaccine. Having a number of different vaccines out there is great, but it also is challenging from a public information perspective to encourage the public to be able to take a vaccine. The FDA and all of the researchers have really committed to making sure that any vaccine that comes out on the market is effective and safe. But there's always going to be these different conversations about, one vaccine is better than another. In a situation where we already have a substantial issue with mistrust with regard to COVID, and also historic issues with vaccine hesitancy, especially in disenfranchised communities. So it looks like we're going to have some limited doses, like I mentioned, early December, mid-December, but it's really not going to be until sometime in the spring where the general public will have wide availability of the vaccine. And so I want to talk a little bit here about how the vaccine is going to be distributed, and how we make allocation decisions, especially with scarce resources. So the CDC has the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices and other groups that weigh in on how vaccines should be distributed, as well as, especially in conditions of scarce allocation, how these vaccines should be distributed. And it's really a conversation about the greatest good for the greatest number of people, based on a number of different factors, especially related to exposure and comorbidities. So there are 4 phases that have been developed for vaccine distribution. The first phase, phase 1, is broken out into 2 different phases, phase 1A and phase 1B. Phase 1A is really about high-risk healthcare workers and first responders. So they would be the first group of individuals that would get vaccine. And so those are individuals that are working in hospitals and other high-risk healthcare environments, as well as our police and fire department, just because the amount of exposure that those individuals have. Phase 1B, which is the second phase, is really people with comorbidities and underlying conditions, and also those individuals in congregate care facilities. We've seen as part of COVID that congregate care facilities have a substantial amount of risk, simply just because of the close nature of those facilities. And typically many of the individuals in the congregate care facilities also have comorbidities or other underlying conditions. Phase 2 is really about critical workers, critical infrastructure workers, older adults, and also educators, so that we can get children back into school. Phase 3 is young adults, children, and other critical infrastructure workers that weren't included in phase 2. And phase 4 is really everyone else. And so, as I mentioned before, we're really probably looking at some time around spring when we hit phase 3 and phase 4. And our best guess is that over the winter, we're going to be really looking at these first couple of phases. Even though the CDC provides these 4 phases, Each jurisdiction does have some authority to decide within these phases how it distributes out to the populations, and really being specific to the jurisdiction. So, for example, in DC, we have a significant number of healthcare workers that come from outside of DC, and the allocations are really based on population, on a pro rata basis of the population, not necessarily the individual populations of these phases. And so we may make decisions that are different than Maryland or Virginia, just so that we can protect our population. These initial allocations that we get likely won't cover all of the individuals in the phase. So, as we look at phase 1A and phase 1B, it's likely that there may be additional breakdowns within phase 1A, simply because of the number of doses that we get. As I mentioned before, we kind of think that we may get around 12.5 million courses, but that's spread out across the entire United States, divided up on a pro rata basis. So with regards to dispensing, each jurisdiction has a number of different options to be able to actually get the shots in people. A lot of the jurisdictions are choosing a variety of different options, really looking at multiple methods, whether that's partnering with the private sector through existing healthcare channels, whether that's the use of pharmacies to be able to dispense medications. And some jurisdictions are choosing to do open public vaccination points, or as I mentioned, some combination. And so what that looks like is an individual in some jurisdictions may go to a pharmacy, some may go to their existing healthcare providers, and some may go to the local recreation center where the government is operating those vaccination centers. As we distribute it out, especially in the very beginning, but all throughout, it's going to be important for us to really pay close attention to how the vaccine is distributed. There's a number of requirements initially about keeping track of exactly where this vaccine is going, the lot numbers, for the reasons to really be able to track how the population is reacting to the vaccine to make sure that there's no negative outcomes. The vaccine cost is covered by the federal government as part of Operation Warp Speed, but the individual providers may bill the insurers for the actual administration of the vaccine. But one of the key terms as part of this program is that there can be no out-of-pocket cost for the individuals. And so really trying to reduce any barriers to being able to receive the vaccine. So as I wrap up here, education and outreach, and this is something that this body is very key for, is making sure that we're providing enough education and outreach for the vaccine. As I mentioned before, there's a lot of vaccine hesitancy, especially in disenfranchised communities. And so we really want to make sure as we're looking towards vaccine that we're identifying trusted individuals in the community, trusted organizations, to be able to advocate for the COVID vaccine. As you all know, there is no definitive cure for COVID, and vaccine is really our only hope out of the pandemic. And so it's going to be important that we do start to create that herd immunity, but that's going to take some time, and that's also going to require a significant number of the population to be willing to take the vaccine. And so, as we talk about that education, especially with MWCOG's mission, that coordination regionally is key. Individuals get care across the borders. We have a lot of workers that move across the borders, especially amongst the federal government. And so it's going to be challenging for us initially, especially as we look at pro rata share based on population, how we're coordinating. And so I know the COG bodies, the health officers, and some of the other health groups have been talking about, how this is going to be operationalized. But I do want to caveat that and say that this is still very challenging. As I mentioned, 12.5 million. Those are just the initial estimates. We don't know time. We don't know how many vaccines are going to be shipped each round of distribution. And so there's a number of challenges still to come as each jurisdiction is really figuring out how to operationalize the vaccines. And so, there's more to come on this. It is November. I know I mentioned December as having some of the first vaccines. So we're still, all of the jurisdictions are very rapidly addressing this problem. They have a number of different task force in each of the jurisdiction to be able to talk through how they're going to be distributed. That's my prepared remarks. I am happy to take any questions.
Thank you so much for that, Mr. Ashley. Timely and, beyond the politics of the day, this is the reality that we face and think what we all are looking forward to. And with that, let me turn to my colleagues for discussion. And it's probably best to do it by jurisdiction and start with my colleagues in Maryland. See if there are questions from my colleagues in Maryland.
If I could just first, thank you so very much for all that information. I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, I don't know if I started speaking too soon.
No, you're perfectly timed, Brother Adams. You have the floor.
Okay, I just want to thank you so very much for all that information and asking. How can we help facilitate, get out the type of information you just shared with us to our broader communities? Any recommendations you can make for us?
Mr. Chairman, Dave Snyder from Virginia. I do have a suggestion.
Hold 1 second, Mr. Snyder. Hold 1 second, Mr. Snyder. Let me grab Mr. Ashley and get him. I think he tried to give an answer, but it was on mute. Let me have staff do that, and then I'll turn to you for a follow-up. Mr. Ashley?
Thanks, Mr. Davis. I apologize for that.
No problem.
So, Mr. Adams, I appreciate the question, and I think that's so very important, right? I think we need to start encouraging the public to become receptive to the idea of vaccine. So I think you mentioned the politics around this, and they've been so very polarizing. Vaccine is already a touchy topic, especially in communities of color, in communities that are disenfranchised. And so priming the public to say, look, this is safe. There's not going to be a vaccine that comes out on the market that's not safe. You have a number of scientists that have pledged for that. And start those conversations now before the vaccine even comes out. There are going to be events that are linked to the vaccine. For example, my stroke example, that's going to cause a lot of misinformation about the vaccine. And so it's going to be important that we as a community, especially we as a region, work very quickly to combat any type of misinformation about vaccine.
Thank you, Mr. Ashley. That was Mayor Adams. That was exactly my question, and that's why I turned to my colleagues first, because I knew my colleagues would ask that question. So it's going to be important for us to encapsulate this information and begin to figure out how we can reproduce, regurgitate, and ensure that all the people in this region are comfortable with what's going on, despite the politics. Mr. Supervisor Snyder, you there?
Sure, Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to provide a suggestion at this point in response to the question. And I know you were going to have Virginia people ask their question just in terms of a response. One of the boards that COG has is the Emergency Preparedness Council. On that board serve not only elected officials, but police, fire, school boards, a military district of Washington. It's the largest table at COG. So I think at some point there's a role for that group, once the distribution, logistics, and ideas have been circulated, to reach a very large segment of the community at one time. So that's just a suggestion about how to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Snyder. Appreciate that, and that we can take that under consideration. Let me make sure that I see Chuck give me a thumbs up. So we're good to go, Chuck, or do you need to comment? Good to go. So let me stay with Maryland for 1 second. Any more questions or comments from Maryland? My board members from Maryland. All right, seeing no further comments from my board members from the state of Maryland, let me go to the District of Columbia, and then I'll come back to the Virginia. So let me turn to the District of Columbia. And I think the District of Columbia seems to be okay. I hear, okay, I see nods. All right, let me turn back to the state of Virginia. Comments, questions? Ms. Gross.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One of the things that I've heard on that the news media is making a big deal about is the need to keep the vaccine not something that so many hospitals and other agencies would not have the proper kind of infrastructure for this. How is that? Is that something that that is being addressed, or are we going to have to pretty much be catch as catch can? Those areas that have that kind of infrastructure that can handle the vaccines will get it, and the others will be left out. I'm concerned about the larger areas versus the more rural areas and their hospital capacities. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that question, Ms. Gross. And it's an important question, and one I think that you're absolutely right. The difference between urban areas and more rural areas will struggle with this. I do believe my personal opinion here is that the requirement for ultra cold has been a little bit blown out of proportion. There is a requirement to keep it at -70 degrees for long-term storage. Pfizer is shipping it with boxes that keep the vaccine cold for up to 15 days and can be resupplied with dry ice to be able to keep it cold. But there is a reconstitution where it does, at some point it does have to become unfrozen in order to go in the body. And in that case, there is a window. It's not a substantial window, but it is longer than a day, where the vaccine can actually stay at refrigerated temperatures while it's being administered to individuals. So it's not as if it has to go immediately from being ultra cold, -70 degrees into your body, from our understanding of the vaccine as it is today.
Thank you for that clarification, because that's never really been something that the news media has reported. I was trying to figure out, that's awfully cold. How in the world do you do that? That sort of goes along with disinfecting. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Gross. Yeah, absolutely. I didn't see any other hand before you, Chair Randall. Let me grab Chair Randall.
So, Mr. Davis, to the conversation of distribution, I think that right now, before we even start talking about a vaccine, this is a good time to make connections with groups in your community that you may not always be connected with. What I've learned being an elected official does not give me carte blanche to walk into any community. It just doesn't. And so, in Virginia, people like the New Virginia Majority, to find leaders in the in the Asian American population, in the LGBTQ population, because the elected leaders ourselves, our influence doesn't go deep enough. We might think everyone knows us and listens to. They don't. People don't know who we are deep enough into these communities. So this is a really important time to make connections with individuals in our subcommunities, so that when it's time to do this, they are our voices to say, come get this vaccine. And it's if you're talking to some 75-year-old African American, they're going to talk to you about the Tuskegee experiment, and they're going to and it's going to be a valid conversation. And a lot of people are not going to know what that is. So it's important for people who talk to our communities for us to start talking to them now, because they're going to be our admittance and into those communities. We cannot wait until even like January, February to have these conversations and think that we are going to be able to penetrate the communities that need to be spoken to so that they feel comfortable to receive this vaccine.
Absolutely. Mr. Ashley?
And Mr. Randall, thank you for that. And, so I can cite an example in the District of Columbia that I think I'm biased, obviously, but I think every group should be doing. So we have the Vaccine Advisory Committee that's chaired by Dr. Nesbitt, our health officer. That's made up of not only just academic scientists that have been working on the vaccine, but also community leaders And so we get a broad brush of understanding exactly how the vaccine is working from a science perspective, but we also balance that out with community leaders, religious leaders. And so it's absolutely not too early to start those conversations today. Again, it's really about priming the pump to get people to be receptive to these. So great point. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me look around just to make sure there are no other questions other than my vice chair, because I was going to let him have the last word with regard to this one. So just checking, any other questions from anyone? Supervisor Bailey, is that you? No, you're good to go. Any other questions? Let me then, seeing none, turn to my vice chair, Mr. Dorsey.
Thank you, Chair Davis. So, Mr. Ashley, thank you for the terrific presentation, just incredibly helpful. And I can't recall a time where I got a presentation so timely that contextualized the media noise that's out there. So just thank you so very much. A question about, I associate myself with all of the challenges and concerns about, conveying to people how to trust in vaccine. To that end, can you give us a sense of the likelihood that the fantastic results in the case of Pfizer, 90% efficacy, which on its surface is going to be viewed by people as untrustworthy because it's a big number. But what's the likelihood that as this goes out into real world use and, people maybe have it thought out for too long and we start to see results where people are saying, yeah, I got vaccinated, but I got COVID. And it begins to create some anecdotal data out there that actually contravenes, what the scientists and smart people are telling folks. Just what's the likelihood that we could be dealing with that kind of scenario as this rolls out?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and thank you for that. I think, in healthcare, we always have the challenge with individuals and follow through. And so specifically with these two first vaccines, being a 2-dose series, a 21 and a 28-day separation, depending on which vaccine, we will see individuals that get one shot and never come back. And so, we have that challenge just to start with, just to put that up front. And you're absolutely right. I think there's going to be a lot of anecdotal information and misinformation that comes out. I think initially there's going to be so much control over the vaccine distribution and dispensing from a quality aspect that we're going to learn a lot. And that's not to say that there are not going to be things that we learn that it can't be out for 5 days. It has to be out for 3 days being reconstituted. And so it's very early to be able to answer that. And I think we as community leaders have to be able to be prepared. We also have to advocate for our populations to still continue to wear a mask, right? So the CDC just came out and said that it not only provides protection against me infecting you, but also you infecting me. A vaccine is not a passport just to get out of a COVID jail-free card. And so I still think that regardless of whether it's 90% or 80%, we still have to be encouraging our communities to be smart and to fight COVID in the ways that we've already been fighting COVID. So I want to make sure that we do continue to emphasize that in addition to the vaccine. It's not a magic pill out of COVID.
Thank you. You're muted, Chair.
Once again, I think I did that to myself this time, Vice Chair Dorsey. Colleagues, is exciting and troubling time at the same time. I mean, we have a lot of work ahead of us, but I think all of the pertinent questions were raised with regard to this piece that we've been hearing about so much in the news. And as Vice Chair Dorsey said, this was more timely than anyone can suspect. And I think the question that Mayor Adams asked with regard to how we encapsulate this information and begin to share and inject this into our communities from the perspective of our leadership is critical and important, taking into consideration what Chair I also said earlier with regard to our reach. And, you know, our reach sometimes we think it's much longer than it actually is. And we need to make sure that we work with our networks to get this type of information out to our public. Chair Randall, it was rolling around in my head, but I couldn't get it out. Nonetheless, I think we've seen all of the questions, and I think that we will work with staff if there is a way to encapsulate this information in a shareable fashion and maybe begin to share it with our board members so that we can do our duty and do our due diligence with regard to ensuring our region continues to work hard together to fight this pandemic. And with that, thank you, Mr. Ashley. I think I'm looking forward to you coming back, probably, if not in January, hopefully by February, to give us an update. I heard your call with regard to the spring for phases 3 and 4, hoping that we can meet those types of milestones. And I hope that we all work together to keep people masked, distanced, sanitizing and washing, even after a vaccine may become, you know, part of the remedy to this situation we've been faced with since late February, early March. So with that, let me continue on and check to see if there's any other business before the board. Looking and seeing none. I want to thank everyone for joining us for our virtual meeting. And I want to remind you that there's no regular meeting on the regular date in December, and encourage you to remember to register for the annual membership meeting that is going to be held virtually on December 9th. Make sure that if you don't have your link, that you check with Pat Warren to make sure that you get your link so that you can participate in the annual meeting. I want to remind you about the November 20th Shaping Resilient Communities partnership with the TPB, the whole community health, timely again, and another rousing opportunity for us to share and impart information amongst each other that we can share with our communities. And I think this is my last regular, at minimum, my last regularly, a regular board meeting as your chair. I'm anticipating that over the next couple of months, we will go through our typical processes to create succession. I will say that I am very proud to have represented the region on this board and learned so much from so many. I think that ultimately, my good fraternity brother, I keep calling him brother, and I guess you guys don't really know, but my good fraternity brother, we are both members of a fraternity called Omega Psi Phi, and many people might have begun to get more in-depth knowledge about what is called the Divine Nine Greek fraternities and sororities, because now we have a vice president-elect from one of our esteemed sororities, Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, our sisters. And we are so happy for that. I can tell them now that many of those $19.11 donations that have come over the last several months came from me. And so I'm hoping that we all continue stridently to represent our region as we have, and we keep our voices loud and heard and cohesive. You know, it often before our tenure was about a competition. It was about trying to best one another. I think it was that we turned a corner with Amazon, where we saw that working together in the spirit of co-opetition, we had a greater opportunity to bring more things to bear right here in the Washington Metropolitan region, the greatest region in this great country. And I sing that from the top of the roofs. I often sing the same praises about Prince George's County, and would expect all of my friends from every jurisdiction to sing those praises. And hopefully, in the spirit of musicality, we're singing in harmony and not in cacophony. So the reality for me musically is this harmonious juxtaposition of so many voices and so many great spirits been one for me to have been a pleasure and honor and a humbling experience to lead. And I thank you for that. And that is my last filibuster for my tenure. And if all hearts and minds are clear, we can call this adjourned.
Hey, hey, thank you for your uplift and your perseverance.
Amen, my good brother. In the spirit of scholarship, thank you.
And happy Thanksgiving to everybody.
Everyone, Joy, see ya on the 20th.
Hey, stay safe,
Thank you
everyone.
for everything.
Thank you.
Happy Thanksgiving.
As well.